Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники. Добро
Good
пожаловать.
morning, dear participants. Welcome to the 11th Central Asian Trade Forum. My name is Evgeny Klimov. I am the head of the Kazakh Federation of the Organic Agricultural Produce Movement. I was invited by the organizers of the forum to be a moderator of this session. The subject that we're going to cover today, sustainable trade and development of the competitive horticulture sector. And the main focus of today's session is potatoes. This is an agriculture produce that is an irrevocable part of the global food chain and system. This year, Central Asian countries experienced an unprecedented growth of potato prices several folds. And each republic has its own reasons for this growth of prices, but there are common factors such as import, low yield, etc. During the session, we plan to discuss the possible ways to achieve self-sustainability of potato growing by using proper types and species of potato and providing for storage facilities. We have international organization representatives. We have representatives from research institutions, business community representatives. And before I turn the floor to the first speaker, I'd like to say a few words about the today's session. Each presenter will have about 10 minutes to present. After each presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session or time for questions, answers, or comments, and our speakers can use microphones to ask questions to their colleagues. And for that, you would have to raise your hand and wait for the moderator to turn you the floor. Other participants can ask questions in the chat box, and I will be reading these questions to speakers who these questions will be addressed to. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the first presenter, Doctor of Agricultural Sciences, Professor Hafiz Mubijanov. He is a technical advisor of the Plant Protection division of the UN, of FAO UN, where he has been working for over 10 years. And currently he is coordinating a global program of FAO actions on green development and development of SOPs, a special agricultural produce, this one country, one priority. That's the name of the program. And its thesis, his thesis was dedicated to selection of potatoes based on different selection technologies. He is the author of two species of potatoes, and he is a tutor of 30 master's degree students. And Hafiz is going to connect to this call from Italy, where the FAO headquarters are located. His presentation is global and regional trends in potato production. Hafiz, the floor is yours. Good morning, Eugene, and good morning, dear participants, dear friends. I do apologize. It's too early. It's 6 a.m. in Rome. That's why I'm going to be talking quietly because of my neighbors. I don't want to wake up my neighbors. I would like to thank the organizers for this event and for inviting me to participate in it. It's a great pleasure to see my friends and my colleagues that we've been working with for a long time. And I would also like to thank you again for giving me an opportunity to share this information and experience of working in this area with you. I have a small presentation, and I would like to show it to you and present it to you. Can you see my screen? Yes. Great. So I have this short presentation about global and regional trends of potato production. Let's look at what's going on worldwide in terms of potatoes and the trends on potato production and the yield of potatoes. This chart is based on the statistics of FAO, FAO stat, for the period of 1994 2019. We can see that the production of potatoes worldwide is going up. It's increasing, although the area for potato growing is reducing. As of 2019, the total area used for potato growing was over 17 million hectares, and the production in production over with a production of over 700 million tons. But the yield, as you can see, is less than potential capabilities at the level of 21 tons per hectare, or it's about 210 centners per hectare. This map shows the countries which produce potatoes and where potato production is well developed. And we see how this colors are color code. Oh, these countries are color coded and based on the scale of their production. If you look worldwide, Asia is #1 in terms of potato production. And due to China, and this is what we're going to see later, and followed by Europe, then South and Northern Americas and African countries. So which countries are top 10 of potato producers? As I said, it's China, with production accounting for over 100, almost 100 million tons of potatoes a year. Frankly speaking, I couldn't imagine that for China, because but we found out that China, we thought of China as a producer of corn and other cultures, but potato, they're leaders in potato production as well, followed by India. And in the 90s, I was looking at India's production of potatoes, and then followed by the Russian Federation, the United States of America, Ukraine, and Poland. Was a small country, and despite the size of the country, they're also they are within the top 10 countries of potato producers, followed by Germany, Belarus, Netherlands, and France. And Belarus is also a relatively small country, but it is still in the top 10 countries. This table shows the yield, and in terms of yield, the European countries are leaders. In terms of yield, it's Netherlands, France, and Germany, and Americas, and our neighbors, or the countries in our region of the former Soviet Union, Russia, has a very relatively low yield of less than 200,000 per kg per kilo. And in China, despite large production, an average yield is around 180, 190 centers per hectare. But the areas take up to 5 million. So what's the situation in our countries? We all know that in the former Soviet Union countries, potatoes are referred to as second bread. And second bread, it has become second bread after our countries became independent. And we know that all of our countries, once they become independent, the areas for potato production started growing up, and the yield the production went up, but the yield still remains low. For the Central Asian region, in terms of the space and area and harvested area, and in terms of gross yield, Kazakhstan is #1. And so it's 1,000 hectares. These are not hectares. That's a typo. I'm going to check it. So before I send you the presentation, I will fix it. And Uzbekistan follows after, and then Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, as we can see from the table. But the production per capita ranges from 21 to 90 kg per capita. We all know that a lot of your countries used to import and export potatoes from other countries, but that mainly depends on the seasonality For example, Tajikistan used to import a lot of potatoes from Russia. And we worked with Azerbaijan, for example, in Vladikavkaz, that was also a former Soviet Union republic. And this is where we exported potatoes, and we still export potato seeds there. Um, the import still exists, but we see good results, and some countries are already starting to export and to neighboring countries, and primarily that I think that that's the fresh potato export. But in some countries, potatoes are not ripe yet to be ready for exports. But we see that Kazakhstan is an exporter. Tajikistan is an exporter as well, with an insignificant amount. And Kyrgyzstan is a leader in this exports. But as for Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, we don't have any data for 2015, but we see that in 2019, they started exporting, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan started increasing their exports, potato exports. So what are the key issues or challenges that exist in potato production? Well, first of all, we see that there are problems with the legislation and certification systems. So there's no documents, and the certification system is not always adhered to, and starting not it's not just in the potato production, but we're talking about, when we talk about the legislation, that we talk about the law on seed production, and then we have regulations and the guidelines, certification guidelines, quality control, pre-certifications, and the whole certification system itself is not well set up and well established, frankly speaking. I should also say that there are challenges still on testing and registration of different types of potatoes. So seed imports, a seed system. Some countries try to transfer the seed system to a self-sustained basis, but that's again faces some challenges. So it could be explained by the defragmentation of land when the small farms started emerging, that fragmented land that wouldn't let the countries to, or the farms that didn't observe the seed turnover and circulation. As a result, we see a large fragmentation of land. Up until now, countries still import seeds. Some of the countries do that, and that pertains to a lot of difficulties. And the main objective of the local seed production development and was to reduce the import of seeds from other countries. Import, as we all know, has to do with introduction of new diseases and pests. Colorado bug, for in our region, we've been fighting with it for a long time. And then viral diseases and other diseases still exist, and the new pests such as potato moth that has emerged, that already exists in a lot of countries and affects potatoes and during storage in Armenia, for example. There's tomato moth and then potato moth that started to emerge. And unfortunately, this pests exist in our republics as well. And this is what our republics report about, but we have specific facts and we're working on this area to fight and combat and to control pests, this pests. We're introducing a lot of pesticides and different plant protection means, and that's also a big problem in agriculture of our countries, because we use poisons, a lot of which are not registered, and the life cycle of these pesticides is not regulated. There are problems with storage and transportation and the use. There are problems with equipment or machinery that could be used to apply these pesticides, and containers that quite often on the field we see that these containers are used and then thrown away and discarded. But a lot of countries in Central Asia, the fields are in mountain valleys, and this poison ends up being in rivers, and the population drinks this water. So there's a big risk of contamination and intoxication of population and animals with these pesticides. There's another question about land tenure and degradation that lead well that tenure and that leads to degradation. A lot of countries have a possibility to lease land, and farmers who cannot or who are not willing or cannot buy their land plot or use their land that they own, they lease it out, and others who use it, frankly speaking, they treat it unprecedentedly badly, and which leads to degradation of land, and they introduce and they use unregulated irrigation systems. They treat land in an improper way, and we have to work on this. So what do we do?
How do we help our countries in the region? Our main objective is to introduce sustainable development of the agricultural sector. And to that end, we've been very closely working with the governments of the country within the framework of certain collaboration programs. We discuss the priorities of the countries, which should contribute to the implementation of SDGs. We're trying to strengthen the legal institutional framework of the countries of the region. We closely collaborate with the donors and partners. For instance, FAO worked with the Canadian CIDA. That was sometime 20 years ago, that when we had a project back in Tajikistan 20 years ago. So, and that was a FAO's project on development of potato seeds. Had a similar project in Kyrgyzstan. Now we're working in Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan. FAO helped the government, and then the government joined in and allocated some funding. We improved the seed beds. We built the greenhouses for cultivation of seeds, and there were some issues related to mobilizing of financial resources. Also, we support farmers' initiatives on sustainable production. We help them do some registration, seed quality control, seed quality protection, certification systems. And we had also a big bulk of our work that is aimed at capacity building, capacity development. This part includes training of decision makers and policy decision makers, researchers, scholars, agriculture specialists and scientists, farmers, students. Also, we help demonstrate new species, new types, and more superior methods of agricultural machinery and the material itself. So we plan to prepare guidelines or some manuals, some leaflets, issue some video classes, video lessons, and a variety of different training programs. Also, FAO plays a leading role in many areas, including in celebrating some of the years. For instance, 2008 was marked and was celebrated as the International Year of the Potato. There is a link over here that you can go and see what kind of activities were conducted by FAO in that year. Next year, well, this organization, World Potato Congress, they have requested, and they have several new countries on board, and they want us to celebrate the International Potato Day. So next year, we will be hosting the Congress in Ireland, sometime end of May, beginning of June, and we're currently looking at this issue. So we might potentially submit this proposal, and depends, of course, on the country's proposal. So we may submit this proposal to the UN General Assembly, requesting them to assign an International Potato Day. I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak before you. Should you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. If you need any information, here's my email. I'm always happy to answer your question. Here, the link to the website of our unit, and a link to the FAO statistics, where you can obtain credible and reliable, detailed information about the statistics, not only in the field of potato breeding, but actually general food stuff and horticulture. This is the statistical information that is collected from the state agencies of statistics of every country who are the members of FAO. So this is very credible information. Thank you very much, Hafiz, for your very informative presentation. I would like to remind our participants that you do have an opportunity to ask your questions to the speakers. You can use the Q&A box, or you can use the chat box for that. If you have any questions at the moment, then we can ask them to Hafiz right now. I mean, if there are like urgent burning questions that you would like to ask right now. Well, I think there are none for the time being, so let's go through all the next presentations, and maybe in the meantime it will be clear what kind of questions are there for Hafiz. Next speaker, and I would like to introduce the next speaker and to congratulate him with the appointment to the new position, and that is the chairman of board of the Kazakh Research Development Institute of Horticulture, Doctor of Agricultural Sciences, the academician of the Academy of Sciences, Timurjan Akbayev. Timurjan Yerkasovich has been studying agricultural chemistry. He focuses on agri-chemical means and ways of preserving the soils. He introduced some integrated system of seed circulation. He develops different comprehensive measures of protecting the potato field as well as gourd culture. So, Timurjan Nikizovich, the floor is now yours. Good morning, dear colleagues. Hello. I hope you can hear me. Is everything okay? Yeah, everything is fine. It sounds audible. I'm very happy to welcome you all here at this forum. I have prepared this kind of presentation. It is kind of on science. There is some state report, a kind of progress report about the potato breeding in Kazakhstan. So in Kazakhstan, this is the, as a previous colleague mentioned, Hafiz mentioned, this is the data for 2019. Actually, with every year, the area for potato breeding increased annually, and now we have 205,000 hectares. And the gross yield is 4 million tons, and average yield is 19.5%, 20.5 tons per hectare. In 1991, we had 900 hectares. Then we went down to 120, but actually now we went back to this 205,000 hectares. That's a very good indicator. According to the Nutrition Institute, the consumption norms of potato is 100 kilo per annum. So if we take the population of 19 million people, something seems to be happening with internet on the side of Mr. Aitbayev. Yeah, we do have some technical issue. Yes, let's give it a minute or two. Probably Mr. Aitbayev will be reconnected. Can you please run the next slide? Can you hear me? Okay, yes, we can. There was some connection. Can you please go to the next slide now? Okay, thank you. So this way, actually, we do have overproduction, and Kazakhstan has some export capacity for potato exports of about 1.5 million tons. But nevertheless, we don't seem to be exporting as much as we have. So we're not using our export capacity fully. If we look at the large scale specialized potato breeding farms, we have agricultural farms or special complexes or LLPs. They are equipped with some modern machinery. They have good seeds. They use very good quality imported seeds, and there are 15% of those in the overall production. Medium-sized and small-sized farms that grow potato make up 35% of the total production. And the private farms, there seems to be something happening again with the internet connection.
Так, у нас опять небольшие проблемы со связью.
Unfortunately, again, Mr. Aitbayev got disconnected. Okay, let's give it. Okay, let's go. So the private small farms are responsible for 50% of potato generation, potato growing. Let's go to the next slide. So, as I already mentioned, according to statistical data, everything is okay with potato growing in Kazakhstan. However, the potato prices have remained high. This year, it was noticed particularly acutely in spring. The price went to slightly above $1. At the moment, we have 150 tenge per 1 kilo of potato. That's somewhere around 30 cents. But that is still pretty high, pretty expensive for Kazakhstan, because we have always had some moderate prices for potatoes, somewhere around 50 to 60 tenge, which is about 10 to 15 cents. But nevertheless, lately, the prices are growing, and that is not acceptable for our country, because the Kazakhstan's climatic conditions allow to grow high yields of potato and high volumes of potato. I think the problem has to do with the lack of warehouses to store the potato. Due to the lack of these warehouses, in between the seasons, we're unable to protect and to maintain the collected volumes and yields and supply now the potato to the general public. We do have about warehouse for about 850 or 900,000 tons. Among those are potato warehouses, vegetable warehouses, storage houses, and fruits warehouses. Most of them are old, some of them are modernized, but we do need some new warehouses of about 25–30%. I mean, considering that we grow about 4 million tons of potato a year, and on top of that we have cabbage, onions, carrots, and so on, and we do need the warehouses with a capacity of 2.5 million tons. So we need more than that to make sure that between the seasons and in winter, we could store these vegetables and supply them to the market without having to increase the price. But in the meantime, and as long as we have this lack or deficit of storage facilities, we will have the high price volatility and fluctuations. Okay, this is the state support measures to potato growing sector. We do have subsidies for potato seeds. We do have subsidies for fertilizers. There are subsidies from the state and plant protection. Actually, fertilizers are subsidized by 50%. And when I talk about the plant protection, herbicide, pesticide, and others, again, 50% of the expenses are covered by the state. Subsidies for drip irrigation. There is also beneficial leasing of machinery. Actually, lately, the government began subsidizing building of the new warehouses as well as development of processing facilities. Yes, the processing, in fact, is lagging behind. It's only under 1% of all the gathered potato is processed inside the country. That is exactly why the government is paying a lot of attention to building of different processing facilities. Starch, maybe potato chips, and all of those things are now in the focus of the government's attention. Well, we do know that without the scientific support, no sector, let alone sector of potato breeding, can survive or can thrive. That is why the government pays particular attention and finances several research activities to create new potato types and species, to develop new technologies, to develop the seed quality. And for that, we do have 9 scientific institutions or research and development institutions, and 2 universities of Kazakhstan train future professionals for the agricultural sector and potato sector as well. And the head institution here is the Kazakh Research and Development Institute of Horticulture. And next, yeah, no, skip this slide, please. Yes. In Kazakhstan, we do have a very rich, very wealthy genetic fund. We do have 250 samples from 40 countries of the world. We can share, in fact, the genetic fund with the colleagues, and if necessary, and we will be happy to borrow some genetic material from them if they want to be part of our genetic fund to study how those new species, new types could adapt to our environment, to our circumstance. So 2,500. That means actually that's very high genetic fund, very rich ones. We update it annually. We use the in vitro services as well. So these are the nursery of the potato genetic fund of our institute. Next. Can you give me the next slide, please? We do have, when it comes to potato, we do have about 130 types of potato. Of them, 55 are our own, 75 are the international ones, Netherlands, Germany, Russia, and so on. This is the types of potato that we test annually. Not only potato, but vegetables and goods as well. We work on the 25 types of cultures, and also we deal with selection of potatoes. So actually, this slide offers information that in 90 we had only 12 locally selected types, but now we have 170 locally selected types. And actually, if we add the data for this year, we have 190, and actually they were all zoned across Kazakhstan. This is the types of all these 55 locally selected types. The early ripen, late ripen, medium ripen, big, small, the good for storage, not good for storage, and so on. And everything is handled at a high level, and actually the yields are very high of our locally selected potatoes. In fact, we can share some of these selected species with our colleagues. If you're interested in our species, then we can offer them or propose them to you for testing purposes, or piloting purposes. We do have the ready-to-use samples, and we can run all these tests with you, with the colleagues, because the type actually the type is the main factor, and provided there are some high machinery technologies, and with the new techniques and technologies, with the high mineral additives, we can reach increase of potato yields. So we will be happy to collaborate with our colleagues from other countries. So this is a nursery, the potato nursery or selection nurseries of our institute. This is a nursery under the Agriculture University of Kazakhstan. I am there, the head of the horticulture chair, and I think today we together with the director of the Institute of Horticulture. Well, I would like to draw attention to the price of the seeds. So the second column, so you have see the prices for the locally selected species, and the second one is for internationally selected seeds. So sometimes we do have the shortage of the local seeds, and we have to buy them from abroad, from the Netherlands, from Germany, and somewhere else. And this is the price per hectare. So the costs or expenses of a farmer to buy seeds per 1 hectare will be around, somewhere around $1,100 or $1,200. But actually, if he or she goes for international seeds, that will be somewhere around $5,000. So the expenses are really high, and we need to pay attention to this situation and to increase the seed breeding of the local species and to supply farmers with the locally selected seeds. In order to develop seed growing,
мы в институте построили завод
in
по
order to improve the local seeds, we have built a factory on manufacturing of virus-free mini nuts, mini tubers of potato.
Это вот такой завод по производству мини-клубней картофеля.
This is the factory itself. It was built in line with the best international or Korean practices.
Это позволяет
This allows us to reduce the norms of seed planting. So instead of actually ton, you can now plant about 7 to 10 times. It's like 300 kilos only, where the expenses are reduced as well. So actually, we are now shifting to 2-3 times of seed circulation. Next, this is a testing laboratory. This is a viral test with some system. You can see the in vitro growing and making sure that all our tubers are virus-free. This is the virus-free potatoes divided by types. These are the microtubers, and this is them being planted in the greenhouse, and as a result, we can get this kind of ready-to-use product, the mini ones, micro ones. This is the collection of the mini tubers. After the vegetation of 60 days, we begin collecting or picking, and we get this kind of micro or mini tubers. So we then sell to the farms of Kazakhstan. They lead them to the elite sorts, and that way, this is how the potato seed circulation is developed.
А вы сами знаете, что
As you all know, the high quality seeds guarantee a high yield of potatoes. Next slide, please. Tamersan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your time is up. Okay, I'm just gonna say a few words about. So if you can click on the slides and just skip several slides. This is the plantations, and that's the sprinklers that we use for irrigation. Okay, that's processing. Next slide, please. We check the quality of potatoes of our potato varieties. We check for starch and other ingredients. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. That's the demonstration of our produce for the farmers and our leaders, and that's the expo show, and that's the training workshop for farmers, for students, for master students, and we train the students. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you for your presentation, Tamerjan. You, as always, are very in-depth and provided information about the situation in Kazakhstan. I have a question. In your presentation, Hafiz indicated, talked about the overall trend about the reduction of planting lands in worldwide, but yet you are seeing the increase of yield per hectare. What can you say about Kazakhstan? We see an increase of planting space. What about the yield? Is it going up per hectare? In the last 5 years, we've been seeing an increase of yield by an average of 200%. But this is still relatively high. It's 19.5 tons per hectare. That's the yield. And the space is less than the average worldwide. It's 2.3 or something. But in order to increase the yield, we have to increase the quality of land and use the drip irrigation and use the high yield varieties of potatoes and high quality seeds. Today, unfortunately, a lot of farmers cannot afford using high quality products and because of high prices. But there's a set of measures to increase yield that's being implemented, and we can gradually reduce planting space and increase the same volumes due to an increase of yields. That's why we are working on programs. We're preparing, the Ministry of Agriculture is preparing a program for development of horticulture, and which provides for an increase of yield of potatoes as well. Thank you for your response, colleagues. Do you have any questions to Timurjan? If you have any questions, you can use my email to email me those questions, and I'm always ready to take them. I have a question. Sure. Good morning, Timurjan. My name is Akhmedov. So you were talking about selection and new varieties. So the relative average yield is 19.5 tons per hectare. What are the indicators for best varieties? Or the early varieties yield about 35 to 40 tons. On medium ramping, or the highest ripening or the latest ripening, it's about 60 tons, given we have a high quality equipment using drip irrigation, so on and so forth. It all depends on the time when they get ripe. The earlier they ripe, the lower the yield. Another question, what are the possibilities of you or Kazakhstan delivering seeds to other countries or republics? Kazakhstan can deliver seeds to other countries, but for that we need to sign an agreement and send an application. And if we're talking about small roots, then you have to sign an agreement with research institutes and determine the varieties. Is it going to be your varieties, Kazakhstan varieties, foreign varieties, whatever? If you need seed materials, then Kazakhstan currently has over 40 seed producing farms that are been certified, and they can have they can sign an agreement with you to deliver seeds to your republic, and they will be happy to do that because, as you all know, we have over 40 farms that produce seeds, and that's a lot for Kazakhstan. They're all working on potato seed production, and they're looking for export markets. Thank you. Thank you. So Temurjan, you mentioned one of the main problems which affected the growth of prices and affects the seasonality, which is a problem of storage and proper infrastructure, and maybe storage technologies and so on and so forth. Yes, the main issue here is storage, because we don't know what to do with it, but all where storage facilities incur a lot of losses, up to 20% of the volumes, and the existing storage facilities cannot guarantee the safety of the produce. And we have to, we lose for up to 20% of produce due to rotting. We're going to have international speakers and presenters from the US who are going to share their technology, about their, talk about their storage technologies, and we'll get back to this later. Now I'd like to turn the floor to Tursun Akhmedov Tursun. He is the Doctor of Agricultural Sciences and Academician of Agricultural Academy of Tajikistan. Academy of Science of Tajikistan, and earlier Tursunboy was head of the Institute of Grape Production, and he has over 180 scientific publications. He's the author of 4 books. He is a scientific head or chief researcher. Tursunboy is going to talk about the situation in the Republic of Tajikistan. So please, Tursunboy, the floor is yours. Thank you. Good morning once again, dear colleagues. Tajikistan, as you all know, is a mountainous country, and 93% of the territory is occupied by the mountains. Only 7% lay in valleys. In Tajikistan, horticulture in Tajikistan, specifically potato growing, is irrigated. In the recent years, we've been seeing an increase of space, growing space, and the gross collection or gross yields. But the yield of this of potatoes remains at around 19-20 tons per hectare. And the overall planting space or area accounts for 53,000 hectares throughout the Republic. In the recent years, out of those, 30% account for early potatoes and 70% for late potatoes. And late potatoes are grown in pre-mountain, mountainous areas in Tajikistan where weather conditions are favorable for growing high yields of this variety of potatoes. However, just like in Kazakhstan, we also have a dependency on the seasonality, and we are observing the abrupt increases of the price of potatoes because early potatoes is insufficient in the amounts, first of all, and the second of all, the yield of early potatoes is very low relative to mountainous potatoes that are grown in mountainous areas. And when the during the hot season in May and June, it's impossible to grow potatoes. We can only grow it when we grow it in the mountainous areas and when we plant them in April or May. And we, with the support and joint effort with SEEP, we were able to select about 50 new varieties of potatoes, and of them, 10 are already used in Tajikistan that have very high yields and high quality yields. And I think that this joint work with SEEP and in the last 15 to 20 years gave a very good impetus to the development of potato production in the Republic. As a professor before, Mumijanov noted before me, the potato is one of the most important horticultures after seeds and wheat. And year after year, the government of the Republic is taking measures to increase the volume of potato production due to an expansion of planting areas. But mainly, we have to keep in mind the increase of yield, and for that we have the limiting factor for us is low land efficiency in Tajikistan. So we have to use organic and mineral pesticides to fertilizers to grow plants. And then we have a deficit of seed-based potatoes and certified seed-based potatoes. For that, it would be nice to continue working with FAO in this area to increase the production of seed-based potatoes that would be certified and guaranteed to obtain a high quality yield and high yields. And since we're a mountainous country, and as I said, potatoes are grown exclusively with the irrigation system. And how the irrigation, we have big slopes, especially in around the mountainous areas, and that's why the land's been washed off, and the fertilizers that we introduce are washed off. So I think for the future, and back in the 70s, we used rainwater to we used old technologies that used rainwaters, and we had a very good effect, specifically in the valleys of Tajikistan. If we move on to drip irrigation and using rain waters, we have huge capacity and possibilities to increase the potato yield. And on top of that, in the mountainous areas, growing seed-based potatoes under the influence of natural conditions, UV, altitudes, cold weather, potato becomes healthier, along with the fact that this technological institute or the agrarian university grows certain amount of healthy potatoes. And the Institute of Biophysics of the National Academy also deals with this issue, but it's not enough, and we have to expand our activities, joint activities. And then we have very few storage facilities in valleys, and both in valleys and where potatoes are grown. So as our colleague was referring to, the loss of 20 to 25% loss of potatoes, we have similar levels of losses, and that's why it would be nice to have a storage facility for early potatoes in the valleys and the storage facilities for late potatoes, both seed and food potatoes in mountainous areas, which would allow to take off the pressure in terms of provision of provision of potatoes for food for the population, provision of farms with seed-based potatoes and seed potatoes. And I think that FAO's experience and SEAL's experience and the experience of the International Potato Institute give a possibility to take measures to make sure that in the near future we increase potato production. And with this regards, we have our scientists and research institute of gardening and horticulture, the Tajik Bulgarian University Agricultural Institute, and the Institute of Physiology and Genetics of Plants of the National Academy of Science. They're working on this area, on this issue, and I think that it would make sense to organize. I don't know about other republics. Sites where we would grow potatoes, both early potatoes and late potatoes, as examples, to be used as examples to set best practices. And this way we would be able to gain potato producers of the Republic, and for seed potatoes, maybe neighboring countries who would be interested in this type of produce. And we could show the potential possibility of yields and the quality of the potatoes that we grow, both food potatoes and seed potatoes. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned similar problems to the ones that Kazakhstan has in terms of storage of potatoes, and you have in Tajikistan very interesting proposal on creating showrooms or showcases that would be able to demonstrate modern technologies for storage of produce and production and growing. If anybody of the speakers have any questions, please feel free to raise them. Just a couple of questions. Colleagues, do you have anything to say? Yes, I have a question. Yes, please. Does Tajikistan import seeds and export seeds, potato seeds, and in which volumes and to which countries? Thank you for your question. During the Soviet time, Tajikistan, as a republic that was growing primarily cotton or monocultures, both food and seed potatoes, it imported it from the outside of the republics. That was in the early 90s. About 35,000 tons of seed potatoes and 160, 180 tons of food potatoes were imported. Now, we pretty much don't import any seed potato, maybe around 1,000 tons. I think farmers or experts could do that, but our own seed potato volume is enough. However, the question of certification has not been dealt with, has not been tackled up until now. So that's why seed potatoes that we grow, we all know that it's impossible to be stored for a long time. Maybe it can be stored for like 6 to 7 months. That's why we're getting the producers interested, or farmers that grow seed potatoes, getting them interested by signing agreements and by guaranteeing that this seed potatoes will be procured. I think with this regards, it would be effective to grow seed potatoes in Tajikistan. And farmers will be interested in growing seed potatoes and producing seed potatoes in Tajikistan. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the next speaker, who would share his ideas with us about the potato production development in Central Asia. That's Durbek Halikov. He is a senior researcher of the potato seed selection institute in Uzbekistan. He has a PhD of agricultural sciences. He has 5 certificates of the National Committee on variety testing in Uzbekistan. He is a researcher of the GIZ project and AMZ project. So, Durbek, the floor is yours. Good morning, dear participants of the forum. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you well. I'm going to talk about development of potato production in Central Asia and the funding of capacity growing to support the diversification of potato growing should be aimed at introduction of new varieties to climate change, water preserving methodologies using the with climate change in mind and impact of climate change in mind, seed production of potatoes and so on and so forth. Central Asia in the valleys has 2 seasons for growing, but in the altitudes, higher altitudes, the main season of potato growing is between April until planting in April and May and collecting the yield in September. Early potatoes are grown in. Could you please lower your camera because we cannot see your face?
Да, можно еще
Yeah,
чуть-чуть.
thank you. This is maybe a bit lower than that. Thank you. So the planting from the 15th of September until the 15th of March, and mid-early types of potatoes used of May, and the yield is collected in May and June. And actually this yield can be exported to Europe and Russia because these regions plant the potato only in April and May. And in summer, potato is grown for seed purposes and for nutrition purposes. Potato also is collected after the collection of grain, and it's planted between the 10th of June and 10th of July. In fact, in summer, you can grow all types of potato with a different duration of maturity. The mid-early types are landed from the end of June, beginning of July, and early ones in the beginning of July. The yield of the potato depends on the number of factors, from climate, ranging from climate and weather conditions, quality of soil, and quality of treatment of soil before planting, on selected type of potato, on the health of the tuber, on the time of planting and time of maturity. It depends also on prevention of different potato-related diseases. It also depends on timely administered fertilizers and also depends on a variety of factors. The problems related to cultivation of potato, the problems related to selection and the seed breeding of potato, the shortage or the low number of potato types available for spring and summer planting for different regions. Many farmers do not know the types and names of the potato types that they are growing. And that leads to a significant deterioration of potato quality due to poor understanding of the processes of the annual selection for the next season, and eventually the potato accumulates different viruses and different diseases. So, and eventually the potato becomes not beneficial. There are lots of expenses, there are lots of non-material expenses invested, not respecting the time frame for potato planting and collection of seeds, not having proper rules of preparing the seed piece for planting. In We do know that actually the meadows are the most widespread types of soils or alluvial soils with poor concentration of minerals, and as a result, the mineralization is very low. No respect and the problem with sanitary regulations in storing the seed potato. One can't argue with the fact that Central Asian countries have similar problems with the deficit of water. In some regions, similar to those problems in Uzbekistan. As a result, we do need some drought-resilient types of potato and some water-saving and water-efficient technologies. Actually, this work on biotic stress has important role in preventing the climate change. The recommendations about follow-up actions, considering all these types, all these problems, first of all, we need to enhance the potato selection works to mitigate the consequences and to do some testing on the piloting with the free and not free kinds of potato with different terms of maturity, mostly early, mid-early, and medium kinds from Europe, US, Canada, as well as with the seeds from the International Potato Breeding Center. The certification, the kind of selection needs to be done for every type of potato, for every type of agro-technical kind. In South Korea, in fact, I saw that many hectares are taken by a Quanta kind of potato, a free type that was issued under the selection program of the US Ministry of Agriculture in 1978. And for transportation, we can use the mini seeds of up to 20 millimeters, the micro seeds from 5 to 10 millimeters, and other types of seed potato. The second is the seed breeding of potato in isolated mountainous areas, which are located as high as 1,500 meters above sea level. In particular, we can use simple, inexpensive methods of potato cultivation and growing the potato by aeroponic method and other methods. Agro-technical activities, such as treating the soil before planting and intertile treatment, irrigation, terms for irrigations by phases of vegetation, terms of planting, depth of planting, and schemes of planting. So defending or protecting the potato from different diseases, a variety of types of using pesticides, seed circulation, introduction of mineral and organic fertilizer, sanitary hygienic activities on storage of potato after collection, after picking stage, and storage, transportation and storage. The research on drought resilient and heat resilient potato, studying the water efficient technologies in potato growing. Number 6, number of activities to strengthen the capacity by using the farmers' field schools and using the field demo sites under competent research and development institutes. Under the project, it is necessary to apply interactive approach to demonstrating the new technologies and methods of horticulture. And when it comes to monitoring, the farmers need to be engaged to monitoring and to assessment of the resilience applicable to the local social economic conditions. Introduction, the farming itself, this component will improve exchange of experience between the farmers and will lead to closer collaboration between the farmers and research and development institutes. Equipping the farmers with the new skills and knowledge in the field of new kinds and water efficient methods of irrigation. Well, given the climate change and implication of climate change and the need to adapt to the climate change and need to adapt the potato growing as well, and all the other related aspects will help the farmers improve the output of their farming activity. Based on the diagnosis of the area in Central Asia, also given the need to improve potato growing, it will be justified to expedite the implementation of pilot projects with the International Potato Breeding Center in enhancing the yield of the potato. As the previous speaker mentioned, Dr. Akhmedov said, in 2005, the office in Tashkent was opened, an office covering Central Asia and Caucasus. The office of the International Potato Breeding Center team, whose headquarters is located in Peru. So, as Mr. Akhmedov mentioned, 15 kinds of potato from their collections have already been transferred to the State Commission, and they are already being used as a kind there. However, in Uzbekistan, we have only 4 selected kinds, that we have taken from their collection. And in Kazakhstan, I think they had 3 or 4, if I'm not mistaken. I cannot tell you for sure. 10 exactly, not 3 or 4, 10. Okay, 10 kinds. Look, that's impressive, 10. And in Georgia, well, I don't know for sure, but more than 15 or even 20 kinds of potatoes were cultivated from their collection. And this year, on the 6th of May, if memory serves me right, then International Potato Seeding Center, SEED, received the accreditation, allowing it to work further for an unlimited period of time in Uzbekistan. So soon, I believe they will open this office. With God's mercy, we will see all the colleagues that we used to work with. I have worked for 12 years in this area, in the center, and we had a number of tests in Uzbekistan, and we had collaborated with Kazakhstan. Last year, I visited Turkmenistan. So I am familiar with the climatic problems of potato growing. Thank you very much for your presentation, Durbek. We do have 2 more presentations. Please be respectful and mindful of time. If you have any questions to our speaker, you can ask them now. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if there are any questions coming from our colleagues, then we'll be happy to answer them. It's just a recommendation. Actually, we used to work closely with CIP, and like I said, there was some collection of them zoned. 7 types were zoned in Kazakhstan. We would like to work on that further. And actually, last year, the collaboration with CIP was suspended. And my recommendation, my proposal is to continue collaboration, to kind of pick up and to restore the collaboration with CIP. Yeah, thank you. Evgeny, may I? The follow-up to Mr. Aitbayev's academician Aitbayev's statement. I would like to express my support to his statement that not only Uzbekistan, but in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, maybe in Turkmenistan, or I don't know, Caucasus, but we really do need to restore, to revive CIP's operations in our countries. In fact, the work was very, very productive, but a certain stage has passed, and certain kind of it sort of phased out, and it came to an end. But I think we need to develop new kinds, to develop some new technologies. And also we need their help in training and retraining of potato specialists. If that could have happened, then we could have great output, because that way we could prepare the specialists, the scholars, who will then continue working in the sector for many years ahead of us, and also offer some good, output as a result of that training. Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments and remarks. Thanks. The next presentation is in recording. It will be presented by a professor and potato specialist of the Plant Sciences Chair, College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, University of Idaho, Nora Alton. She's a professor and she's a specialist of this university. Nora has prepared more than 500 presentations. She is a co-author of more than 500 scientific works and papers. She was the president of America's Potatoes Association, and since 2014, she became the director of the World Potato Congress. Actually, we've mentioned this organization already in the presentation by Khafif Mohammedanov. She will speak about the management in early storage of agricultural produce. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nora Olson. I'm with the University of Idaho, and today I'm going to talk about early storage management. One important consideration when storing potatoes is that you never can increase the quality. You're only helping to maintain the quality that you do have and try to minimize any reductions in that quality. There are a multitude of physical and physiological changes that occur to those potatoes when they're being stored, as well as you're always contending with the potential for disease development to occur while they're stored. Some of the storage basics are obviously to be kept in the dark. Ideally, store only sound potatoes. Try to remove any of those potentially bad potatoes or rotten potatoes prior to going into storage. You really want to structure that so you're storing with the proper maturity of the potatoes, whether we're talking a physical maturity and skin set, or if you're talking chemical maturity for processing. You want to maintain your desired temperature and your relative humidity, and you need adequate and well-distributed airflow. Now, potatoes are alive, and they are respiring when they're in storage. And here's just a simple equation for respiration. So we have carbohydrates with oxygen. And what's being released in storage is carbon dioxide, water, and energy. And in this case, the release of energy is in the form of heat. So what do we need to do in storage? What are some of the objectives? Well, one, we need to minimize this carbohydrate loss, which is the starch, the good components of the potatoes we want, via this respirational losses. But we also need to ensure that the potatoes are respiring because this maintains the quality of the potatoes. So we need to provide that oxygen, that fresh air coming into the building. We need to remove that carbon dioxide, venting it out to the outside. And we also need to remove that heat of respiration. Therefore, we can maintain our desired temperature. But we also are battling that evaporative loss. And so we need to provide water humidity to minimize those evaporation losses. Fortunately, a storage is a controlled environment, meaning that we can bring in the ventilation that is necessary, humidify that air as necessary to maintain the temperatures. So the three basic components of controlling that environment is temperature, humidity, and ventilation. Let's start out talking about the current industry recommendations for that early storage management. First step is the recommendation to harvest with pulp temperatures out in the field between about 7 and 18 degrees C. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's important and what that means. Your second step is going to to remove field heat immediately. That is, if they're coming in on the warmer side of the temperature range. You're going to go ahead and cure those potatoes for about 2 to 3 weeks between 10 to 13 degrees C. And again, this is to facilitate wound healing of those potatoes, followed by some sort of ramping down to your holding temperature. Some will go at a slower ramp, some will go at a faster ramp, depending upon your objectives, your variety, and what the market use of those potatoes are. And then you're going to identify a holding temperature that's appropriate for, again, the use of those potatoes and the variety that you're storing. Let's talk about the ideal pulp temperatures to have at harvest. Ideally, we want to avoid those real high temperatures above 18 and those temperatures below 7 degrees for two reasons. One is the potential impact pulp temperatures have on bruising and wounding, and the second is on disease development. In terms of wounding, we're worried about black spot bruise. It's a physical impact followed by this chemical reaction that causes this blackening spot in the potato. It can be a quality issue for all potatoes. Another concern following a physical impact or mechanical damage is a shadow bruise. And what it does, it produces a break in the skin or the tissue. And this can be a quality issue, but really what we're worried about too is that it's an entryway for diseases. And here's just an example of one disease that takes advantage of that entry point or that shatter bruise is Pythium leak. But other diseases can be Fusarium dry rot and some of the other ones that don't necessarily need an entry point, like pink rot, but really can take off a lot more if there is a shatter bruise. Here's just an example of that association between wounding and pulp temperatures and why we've established those ranges. Now those lower temperatures actually favor more black spot bruise and shatter bruise. Those higher temperatures can really favor some of our diseases. And doesn't mean that we're not immune to having some sort of wounding or shatter bruise at those warmer temperatures. So here's an example on a russet potato. That potatoes that were harvested at about 16 degrees C, if they're wounded, they have a chance of having Pythium leak. If they're not wounded, not as great of a chance. The risk is much lower. But you start to get to those warmer temperatures, 21 degrees C, all of a sudden your risk for Pythium leak increases substantially. Plus, all of a sudden now, those ones that are not wounded also have that chance. So we're just seeing that implication of wounding as well as pulp temperatures on the potential for having Pythium leak, which is a storage disease concern. Now let's talk about when potatoes actually get into the storage and what you need to do first. So the first thing we need to do is remove that field heat immediately. This is important if potatoes are coming in at those warmer temperatures than what you want. Now if we get to about 18 degrees and we decide to stop harvesting, we put those potatoes into storage and we don't have any cooling air or refrigeration to cool those potatoes down. Now the heat of respiration alone can be tremendous at this time. So even after 12 hours, that 18-degree potatoes turned into about 21 to 22 degrees C just because of the heat of respiration alone. That's not even including the heat load coming off of it. Then you can factor in that if those potatoes were wounded, immature, or diseased, that respiration rate is higher, and therefore the heat of respiration is going to be a lot higher. So overall, you need a lot of cooling air during this time to remove that heat of respiration and field heat to get these potatoes cooled down in time. Here's just an example of some potatoes that are in storage, and we're using an infrared camera to be able to pick up on the different temperatures of the potatoes in storage. And you can see the ones that are closest to us are a lot warmer than the ones that are in the far end. And it just gives you one other tool or technology to be able to demonstrate the differences in temperatures you can have within a storage. So next is to cure those potatoes. And really what you're trying to do here is to wound heal them. And typically we cure anywhere between 10 to 13 degrees C for 2 to 3 weeks. Now what's important about this time though too is to factor in that higher temperatures that you were at when you were removing that field heat. Because during that time you were still curing or wound healing those potatoes. Now this wound healing time or curing period is a very important time in the journey of the potato in storage. Our goal is to heal up any wounds, shatter bruises, cuts, things like that happen during harvest. And what that's going to do is to help minimize the water loss, evaporation from those wounds, as well as to help with any kind of disease development, meaning that we're going to heal those wounds up so they don't have the opportunity for other diseases to come in, such as like Fusarium dry rot. But also this wound healing period time can affect other things about the potato. One, let's just talk about sugar concentrations. One, we can actually use this time to our advantage to maybe extend out the duration, maybe keep them a little bit warmer to condition those potatoes, and hopefully then those sugar concentrations will be favorable to good fry color. But also, if this wound healing time is a little bit colder, that's not necessarily a good thing in terms of sugar concentrations. But this is the time period where we potentially have greater weight loss. We also have the potential for condensation, disease development, and other quality issues. So it is a very important time to really focus on what are those conditions that you want to be at for the wound healing period. This is an example of a project where we looked at 3 different russet varieties. And what our objective was to look at what is the impact of curing temperatures on weight loss over the course of the whole storage season. So what we want to do is just alter those curing temperatures for the first 2 weeks at the beginning of the storage, and then see the impact or the implications of that throughout the whole storage season. So a couple things we can see from this. One is that the majority of the weight loss is occurring in the first 30 days. So if you are struggling with greater shrinkage in storage than you want, really need to focus on that early storage management within days to weeks of being in storage to really try to minimize that weight loss. But what we also see is those temperatures that you have, that potatoes are at early on like that, can really dictate how much weight they're going to lose throughout the whole storage season. As seen with 18 degrees C, much higher weight loss overall, indicated by the red line, compared to the blue line and the purple line. What's really interesting is that blue line is actually 7 degrees C. And what this is showing is that those potatoes were cold enough that they did not heal at a fast enough rate and therefore lost more water from those potatoes. So really being around that 13 degrees for wound healing is a good place to be in terms of minimizing weight loss. Now you finished your wound healing period, you have now ramped down to your holding temperature. So those holding temperatures are going to be appropriate for your end use, whether those potatoes are destined for the processed market, the fresh market, or for the seed market. Those holding conditions will also be dictated by the cultivar. Some cultivars can be held at colder temperatures, some need to be stored at warmer temperatures. Now ideally, it's best to store the cooler the temperature, but unfortunately, cooler temperatures can increase sugar concentrations. So this is not always a luxury for some varieties if they're destined to be processed into some sort of product, a fried product. But those cooler temperatures do suppress sprouting and slow disease development. So this is ideally where you want to be in terms of your holding conditions. This also, your sprout and disease program will also help demand what should your holding temperatures be as well. So in summary, we talked a lot about that early storage management, but really we need to back it up one step further. And when you're making a decision on what type of storage design you need, the equipment, all of that needs to be appropriate for your climate and your location. Then we base our management off of what that climate is and that storage design as well. It's also really important to make that connection between what happened out in the field to storage. We talked a lot about pulp temperatures and how important it is to know those pulp temperatures, but it goes one step further and understanding how that crop was grown, any disease issues, any other concerns that there were need to be translated to what is happening in the storage so you can make management decisions based upon that. We saw how important early storage management is because it really will dictate how those potatoes respond throughout the whole storage season from early to late, and that includes weight loss, disease, and quality maintenance. Very important to really focus efforts on that early storage management. And we also talked a lot about how important it is to introduce that fresh air, remove that carbon dioxide, and really remove that heat, either from the heat from the field or heat from respiration from that pile, to really be able to control the potatoes that are in there and have them at the temperature you want. So it really boils down to ventilation, temperature, and humidity control are our assets here to be able to maintain quality of those potatoes in storage. I'd be happy to answer any questions via email, and thank you for allowing me this time to present.
Итак, мы просмотрели доклад Норы Уолсон.
We watched Nora Wilson's report. She's an expert of potato growing from the Idaho University. It's a very interesting report and presentation. I think that experts in this field would found it interesting and would probably found something interesting, something new from this report. Next, I'd like to turn the floor to the representative of IVI company, Case Kit. This company is a leader in the area of new technologies of ventilation and microclimate control in warehouse facilities. He is specializing in post-harvesting systems, climate control systems, ventilation systems for storing of root plans from installation to maintenance. But I'm going to turn the floor to Chase Keeper now. He's going to talk more about his company and what the products that they produce and approaches that they use for potato storage.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everybody from Idaho here in America. And I appreciate the time and opportunity to talk a little bit about IVI and do a quick introduction of who we are and what we do. And get this set here. So IVI, we are a company that is based out of the state of Idaho here in the US. We have over 50 years experience in post-harvest management of potatoes and other products like onions, sweet potatoes. But we have a long relationship with a lot of the global food processors like PepsiCo, Lamb Weston, McCain Foods. We have worked closely with them over the last 50 years as the development of frozen French fries has been developed and been a big part of that process. Our designs are preferred by those global processors because we are very adaptable to all climates. We can create the environment within the storage in really any ambient conditions or climate. We have over 30 years experience exporting globally. We have storages located in more than 22 countries currently. We also store a wide variety of different products, which I'll talk about towards the end here. So here's a little brief review of some of the places where we have storages, the time frame that we entered those countries and the quantity of storages there. And then here's just a map representation of those locations as well. So Nora gave a great, or Professor Olson gave a great review of the basics of storage. So I want to go through a little bit more in detail on how we achieve those conditions that she explained within our storages to improve the quality of the potato, but also reduce the loss that you might experience in storages. Within our storages, we can see potatoes stored successfully up to 12 months and with a loss of around 6 to 7% over that length of time. So as Professor Olson mentioned, the three keys to storage are humidity, temperature, and airflow. And I won't talk a lot specifically about those topics, but I did have an example here of how humidity can affect your storage and how it results in a dollar amount of loss. So for the example here, based off of some of the information she provided in this graph here that is on the screen, at 45 degrees Fahrenheit or 17 C, 90% relative humidity within the storage results in a 9% loss, which is 2 times more than at 95% relative humidity. So over that length of 8-9 months, that 90% room, or the room with less humidity, will result in $22,500 less than the storage with 95% humidity. So humidity is very, very important, as well as all three pieces, the temperature and airflow, just like was mentioned previously. But those are some of the examples of, or that's a good example of what money can be saved by having the proper storage. Really, any sort of storage building can be utilized. There's a wide variety, and usually whatever type of construction is preferred in your region can be made into a successful storage. So here I've got a representation of what a basic IVI storage, bulk storage would look like. You notice this area here is what we we typically call the fan house, or it is the equipment room. You can see laid out here. At this end, we have the cooling coils that will give us the refrigeration. We've got the fans, and then we've got what we call the humidicell, which is an evaporative cooler, which gives us humidity, but also at harvest time, when it's hot outside, it gives us a lot of evaporative cooling without using the refrigeration system. So all of this equipment is located very central, very easy to access and maintain. And the big difference that you'll notice between an IVI system and a system that comes from a different company, or say Europe, for example, is that 100% of the air that we supply to the potato passes through all this equipment. So the potato that is, or the air that is supplied to the potato is always at the correct temperature within 1/10 of a degree, and is always at the desired humidity. So that air that we are supplying is always at the condition that it should be. So here's just a representation of the airflow. So the arrows in blue show you the cooled air that we're supplying to the product. And then the orange reddish color is the return air after it has passed through the product and is warmer. So this is when we are in a refrigeration mode. We're not taking in any outside air. We're not purging out CO2. We're just cooling and recirculating air. And then this next one would show, depending on the location and the local environment, we will either bring in air through these outside thermidors, or we call them T-doors, or we would bring in fresh air more continuously through a heat exchanger in really warm climates like India, for example. But you would bring in the fresh air and it would pass through all of the equipment as well. So it is again at temperature, and it has the humidity desired before it is applied to the product. And then that warm air from the top side of the pile would then exit out the other end of the building. So, and this would be a bin storage, real similar, works the same way, same equipment. We would just apply that conditioned air to the product through an air wall. And it is pressurized, so it is forced into those air, or those storage bins, and forces that air through the product, moving out the CO2 and supplying it with the fresh air. Again, just in the recirculation mode, and then the fresh air mode. So here's just some photographs of the different pieces of equipment. You have the humidicell here on the left, along with the fans. Here in the center, we have the T-doors, or the thermidors, that are allowing in that fresh air in climates where it's can be used. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the evaporative cooler, or coils, that are providing the refrigeration to the system. You'll also notice above the coils, there's some bypass doors. So for those CIPC applications or other chemical applications, we can bypass the air past those coils, and that chemical doesn't have to pass through the coils. And we can do the same thing with the humidicell as well. Here on the left is just a representation of some bin storages. But I also just wanted to cover briefly some of the things that we provide as a storage company. We have an in-house engineering team that engineers every project specific to that customer, to his location, his product, and his demand. So some of the things that we look at when we're designing a storage is the static pressures. So all of this equipment, the humidicell, the cooling coils, they create a pressure drop as the air passes through them. So we have to size those all correctly so that we don't get too much static pressure, resulting in a loss of the fan functionality. So it's all very important to make sure that we're getting the air that we're saying the quantity of air that we're saying the fans are delivering. We also look at air velocity. So at every step throughout the storage, we're looking at the velocity of the air to make sure that we are distributing it all evenly throughout the building and that we're not losing the majority of our air or in the first half or the first 3/4 of the building, starving the other end of the building of air. So those velocities are all designed by the openings of the air plenum and the air ducts as well. And we also do a heat load calculation. So based off of your climate, based off of the product, the quantity of the product, we come up with the amount of heat that is generated within the storage, the amount of heat that we have to overcome from the outdoor conditions, the outdoor environment, and then we size all of the equipment accordingly, the refrigeration equipment and the humidicell. So this is something that we do on every project specific to that project so that the storage functions properly. And then it's all tied together with our control panel. So this is the blue one, the one up at the top is our latest control panel. It runs everything automatically. So it monitors the temperature, it monitors the CO2 and the humidity. It turns the equipment on and off as needed. Really, the only thing you have to do is set the temperatures and it takes care of itself. It also gives you remote access via your mobile device or through the internet on a browser and a website. So you can remote access and you can view, monitor, and make any changes to the storage remotely that you can make standing within the storage. So it makes it very user-friendly. And then another representation of all the products that we have experience storing. So if we know, for example, that you want to store potatoes, onions, and or cabbage in a storage, we can design that up front to handle all of those with very little difference between the two. The control panel is capable of running settings for each one of those products. So these are all products that we have experience with that the control panel is designed to function with. And that's all I have for now. So I'm willing to take any questions that there might be.
Well, dear participant, we have listened to the presentation of Chase Kidd on his development, on his work in Idaho. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions to our speakers? Well, if there are no more questions or no questions, then I do have a question. Chase, I had an opportunity to visit the website of your company. I saw that IVI company also offers some organic certified products or preparations which extend the longevity of a potato life. That's a very interesting direction. I mean, for me personally, because I am myself dealing with organic farming. Also, organic is, I mean, this whole direction is very important for the Research and Development Institute of Kazakhstan. For currently, the Ministry of Agriculture of Kazakhstan is financing or funding a large-scale program to develop organic agriculture farming in Kazakhstan. And the Plant Protection Institute specifically is responsible for researching the storage, the impact of organic products on storage and longevity in storage and so on. Institute of Horticulture has a similar survey, a similar study, but that is on the potato storage, what you mentioned as well. And I wonder, if our research organizations could use your organic approaches or your organic preparations of liquids to test in their own farms, in their own nurseries and fields. Also, Mr. Aitbayev, I wonder, what do you think? Mr. Aitbayev, the chairman of board of the Horticulture Institute, what do you think?
Да, я уже написал в чат, что эти препараты очень важны. Почему? Потому что вы все знаете, что
I also wrote in the chat that these are very, very important because when we talk about root cultures, these are the main cultures that happen throughout the year, and they are stored for 6 to 8 months, and they usually have a tendency of growing, or kind of or being susceptible to a number of diseases. And we cannot treat them with chemicals because then it creates some insecurities or hazard for human bodies. But if you have this kind of interesting fluids or preparates or products, I don't know, medications, whatever you call them, then we would be really interested in having them and testing them and just if showing them and maybe advertising even them among our farmers, because this is very important for Kazakhstan and for Kazakhstan's population. So we actually urge you, we ask you, if possible, to provide some samples, maybe advertising samples or maybe some testing samples, to test those on carrots and on potatoes. We're ready to collaborate with you, and we can even include your product into the recommendations that we disseminate among farmers, and as products recommended to be used in Kazakhstan, some joint recommendations with our colleagues, of course. I'm sure that there will be co-authors, so they will be interested in this event. I'm sure that we could even submit for grants from the government, and provided you offer this kind of initiative.
Yeah, so IBI does have a wide range of products for CIPC fungicides and organic options for both, for fungicide protection and sprout inhibiting. So that's something that we do a lot of. In fact, we're the largest applicator of those products in the US. So it's something that we know very well. The products that are being used in Europe as a CIPC replacement is a product that has been used here in the US for many years that we've got a lot of experience with. So that is definitely something that we can share that knowledge and help get samples to where that can be tried there as well.
Хорошо, спасибо, Chase.
Good, thank you, Chase. Dear colleagues, does anybody else have any questions or maybe comments to the presentation, maybe some proposals? In conclusion, this is our final presentation for today's session.
So I see there's a question in the chat for honeybee storage.
В чате есть вопрос по хранению меда.
So that's something that is relatively
На самом деле,
new.
это достаточно новый аспект для нас.
I don't have a lot of that information. I haven't been directly involved.
Я напрямую не участвовал в такого рода проектах.
But I can get that information.
Но я могу, в принципе, вам эту информацию предоставить.
Yeah, what they're doing is storing honeybees
что
over
они...
winter for hive health. So if who wants that information, if they can provide their email or something, then I can get some of that information and give it to them.
Хорошо, спасибо, Чейз, за ваше выступление.
Thank you, Chase, for your presentation. Thank you. Okay, here's the email in the chat. Yes, we don't seem to be having any more questions. Yes, there is a question though about application and usage of compost, vermicompost. What is the due portion? Can you overuse it, overdose in it? That was a question from Rayev. He is responsible for vermicompost, and he is asking about the overdose. Timur Nekrasovich, I think, could speak about this because he has worked with this biohumus, and he could take this question rather than asking. Yes, I wrote this in the chat, my answer. I wrote my answer that we're ready to study the norms of these biofertilizers. We looked at the different norms of organic fertilizers. In fact, we could use the manure, and we could also the bird manure in the recommended amount, 5 to 10 tons. So we studied that. We studied the efficiency of different fertilizers of biohumus. Well, biohumus could be applied. Yes, you can actually throw in the 5 or 10 or 20 ton, but it's going to be very expensive. As for these two types of fertilizers, I will read those in the chat. Yes, we're ready to study them. If you provide us the samples, we could look at them. And provided you give us the samples, you give us some, certain materials to see, we are ready to test the safety thresholds, in terms of the nitrate concentration and so on and so forth. Yeah. As a rule, the manufacturers of all the technologies, of all the fertilizers who want to access the market of another country, they usually demonstrate the efficiency. I mean, they have to prove the efficiency of particular preparation or particular fertilizer under the local conditions that is needed by the grower, by the farmer. Yes, we're ready to study, we're ready to test it, we're ready to pilot. Yes, you're ready to even allocate a demo site for that. Yes, absolutely. Yes, we can allocate a testing site for that. Then we can look at the technologies and everything, and we can see if that works. Okay, good. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? May I? This is Mr. Akhmedov, Tursunboy. Mr. Kiselov, the conference that you're hosting is very, very interesting. In terms of the information that was provided by the participants, by the panelists. And I think that we have things that could be learned and could be benefited from Tajikistan, or could be vice versa, introduced and used and applied in Tajikistan. That is why we exchange details now with Professor Aitbayev. But here's what I wanted to say. Can we receive the presentations of the participants? That's one. And if possible, a more detailed presentation of the statistical data from Professor Muminjanov. I know that he has lots of materials, lots of information under his hand, and not that he couldn't really be speaking about potato, but maybe on some other vegetable cultures and so on, so that we could all have this framework of credible information, and so that we could all use the official data. So I ask you, Professor Muminjanov, to provide the statistical data on indicators of areas, yields, productivity, and so on. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your remark. Well, if there are no more presentations, if there are no more comments and feedback, let me wrap up and let me summarize out now the discussion. Our today's session was initiated by the interseasonal fluctuation of prices, as mentioned by the representative of Kazakhstan, which significantly affected the, it led to prices growing several times at the local market. Our speakers today, panelists today, spoke about potato-related situations in the countries of Central Asia. They spoke about production indicators. They highlighted the problems related to growing or storing of the produce. One of the key challenges, key problems that affect this interseasonal price fluctuation, as our speakers mentioned, was these problems related to storage of root products or root crops, and potato specifically, that have to do with infrastructure, some individual treatments, and lack of technology. So that is one of the problems. And our speakers today from the US, Nora Olson, she spoke about the management of early storage of potato. She gave certain recommendations on temperature regimes, on humidity, and others. Chase Kidd from IVI Corporation spoke about his company's capacity to provide and to supply equipment necessary for potato breeding and potato storage. The parties, in fact, from Kazakhstan and the US have agreed that they will launch a collaboration and maybe even first mutual tests of this biofertilizers and bio-treatment fluids. I think that's a good foundation for collaboration, maybe a good output of a discussion like this. And in fact, for those kind of tests, Kazakh Institute of Horticulture will allocate a demo site, or several demo sites, and provide all the necessary materials and conditions. Yes, I reconfirm. I would like to thank all the speakers for their very interesting, very informative or rich report. And I would like to thank our speaker from FAO, speakers from Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, and the US. Well, I do hope that this forum, this particular panel was very useful and useful for our participants and attendees as well. And I hope that in the future, this forum will bear specific and even tangible fruits. Thank you. If you have any last minute statements, last minute words, if you have any questions, well, if there are none, then let us finalize and let us end our meeting. Thank you.
Благодарю всех. Всем большое спасибо.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Мы заканчиваем. До свидания.
This is the end of it. Thank you.